IBNXradio.com. IBNXradio.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to this Monday edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice. Yes, Derek, I got it right. Today is Monday, only because I knew yesterday was Sunday. And my correspondence,
Michelle.
Double R.
All right, so today's show we're going to look at, and let me put this disclaimer. Okay, so today's guest is, she doesn't know it, but secretly she's like one of the people I look up to, because I want to be like her when I get older, when I grow up. So I'm looking for a really good excuse to get the doctor on the show, and what better excuse than to talk about mental health and the holidays. So that's what today's show is going to be about. We are speaking about mental health in the holidays and what it looks like for individuals who may or may not be dealing with their own set of demons or their own mental issues, things like capacities. And with suicide becoming such a big talk issue, which is what we've talked about a lot the last couple of months, the holidays a lot of times can trigger stuff like that. So, having the doctor on to kind of help us pinpoint, what we should be looking for, what are some telltale signs, because right now, in this climate, it's really hard to know if somebody's serious about committing suicide, or if somebody's seriously depressed, or are they just looking for attention on social media. We just don't know these days. So the doctor's going to be here today to help bring us a little insight as to maybe some things we can do to kind of ward off these things and make sure the people we love are safe and make sure the people that we love are in good mental health. So today, our guest is none other than the doctor, Sonja Sutherland, everybody. So we're so happy to have. Also, she is my station mate. So her show comes on right before my show on Mondays from 10 to 12. So before you listen to me, listen to her because she's a doctor. And I'm soon to be a doctor at some point. So everybody, Dr. Sutherland is here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So introduce yourself here to everyone. Tell them about you, your background, all that good stuff.
I've been in the field of counseling since 1998, I think. Hope that doesn't date me too much.
I literally had just graduated from high school. I literally just graduated from high school a year before that.
And so I've done work in psychiatric residential, in-home therapy, private practice, outpatient mental health. And right now I'm teaching at Richmond Graduate University, so I teach in their graduate program for counselors, and so I train counselors and supervise counselors now.
Good God. What made you want to get into this field? Like, this is...
Oh, that's a long story. I didn't plan to be a counselor.
Really?
No, that wasn't the plan.
Just don't tell me you had planned to be a dancer or something, because I'm like, wow,
no.
that would have been amazing.
No. I had planned to... Well, I wanted to open my own schools. So I originally was going to do a doctorate in educational leadership, and I just wanted to do the counseling degree in order to understand how I wanted to put counseling in my school, because guidance counseling wasn't really working the way that I needed it to work for underserved populations who really had outside influences, family issues, neighborhood issues, things that were impinging on their ability to learn, that were external to the school, that guidance counseling wasn't really dealing with. And so I really wanted to understand counseling more and understand family work and all of that to be able to put that in my school. But God had other plans for me.
Doesn't he always?
Yes.
God has a sense of humor, and he knows how to orchestrate. It's an amazing thing. So you just ended up taking a class or something, and you liked it, or what happened?
Well, I did the undergrad in psychology and then did the master's in counseling, and then ended up in the field and just ended up teaching, and realized that opening my school was just not what I wanted to do. So
I got a question. How'd you? Because I studied psychology in school too, and I don't want to say it became difficult, but like as things are revealed to you in education and you start to apply them in life, like you start seeing like a lot of things. How did you get past like that threshold? Because that's what I wanted to go back to. Like, okay, I like understanding people and how they work and how the mind works and how the mind, like how powerful it really is. And when you really start getting into that and then you learn and then you apply it, I got to a point like I started asking so many questions like, why everybody else don't think like this? Like, how did you get past that, like asking that question to yourself?
I don't know that I ever asked myself why others don't think this way. I think that the more that I studied as I went into the master's program, the more I understood how people's family backgrounds, and how all of that contributes to how people see the world and how they see themselves and how they interact with the world and how they interact with themselves. I think maybe that those questions were answered for me too, in terms of understanding why people see certain things and don't see other things. And I guess it just kind of nailed down why I felt like counseling was so important as something to contribute to the world, and why everybody should be in counseling at some point in their lives.
Yeah.
I've heard that statement. Explain that. I've heard people say that a lot lately, that everybody should be in counseling. Why?
Well, I think that if we approach the idea of mental wellness and emotional wellness from a wellness perspective, which is what we teach in counseling, meaning we look at it as a preventative measure, then I think a lot of the emotional disability and the mental disability that we see, some of it wouldn't be there. Not that none of it would be there, that's not true. But there are a lot of things that people can do when they're not experiencing mental and emotional stress to learn to understand themselves better, how they operate emotionally, how they interact with other people, and begin to be healthy in those ways. And that kind of prevents some other things from coming into play in terms of their emotional wellness. And so I think that it's important for everybody to gain better awareness of self, better awareness of their emotions, better awareness of how they think. That just is helpful, and it can prevent problems down the road. A lot of times what we see in counseling is people coming in after everything has hit the fan, when stuff is horrible, when the work that they need to do to get better is now just 10 miles long. And had they come in when it was a mile long or 2 miles long, they would be way ahead of the curve. And so that's why I think everybody should be in counseling. Nobody knows everything about themselves. Nobody is so self-aware that there isn't something that they can learn or improve about how they interact with themselves and other people in the world. That's just not the case. That's why I think everybody should be in counseling at some point.
So is it like on a day-to-day basis, with all that we go through, the stress of jobs, the stress of family, is there a breaking point that you should kind of be like, okay, I might need to consider like going to counseling?
Well, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like what she's saying is like that should just be a regular thing. Like how we view mental health that I've noticed in this country is it's kind of been stigmatized to where you feel like there needs to be a breaking point before you say, oh, let me go in. But if we treated it more so like going to a physical, like January's coming up after the holidays, we're all probably going to go in for our top of the year physical just to make sure all the pipes still work and everything's good. If we treated mental health that same way, like, oh, let me go in just to make sure everything's okay, like, I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're saying,
That
more
is
so
what I'm
that
saying.
it should be, like an oil change for your brain.
It should be.
I think it should be more frequent than that.
Yeah,
Like-
well, no, that
like
was just
going
an
to the gym.
example.
Like,
That's like for some people, that's an everyday thing.
yeah, but I mean, like she said, like we don't, and a lot of time, like we don't assess how much we actually put on ourselves until we already broke. So like when you break, you're like, oh man, I'm broken now. But if you would have realized, like in the moment of putting all that weight, if you would have had somebody or some way, like an outlet, people would be like, going to the gym is like an outlet. You can go to the gym and pump all the iron. That your mind is working. Like I've been in those places where I'm like hurting, and I just go to the gym like, all right, let me go hoop or let me do this, and then you release it on somebody on the court, like, and it's not the same. It's like going to talk to somebody, and this therapy is great. You know what I'm saying? Like I used to go to therapy when I was a kid because I would have like, I was one of those people like I didn't know my dad, and then when I met him, I was like, nah, you whack. And then like I learned like why he was like that, and then I like didn't feel away at all. Like even now I'm still like, as I've grown, I'm like, yo, like why? You know what I'm saying? Like your dad was like a great person, and then like you, and then like I'm like a great, like where did the disconnect happen? And then I learned like where it happened, and then he never like tried to fix it. Like he was in the military, he never went to therapy. Like when he came home, he never went to therapy. So he was in mad abusive relationships. He got kids all over the place. Like he never, like she said, like you never assess it when you're in it, and then when it's over with, you look at it like, man, I should have went back. But now you got 50 years done flew past you. Your oldest son is 50. I'm your youngest son. I'm 30. It's 20 years between me and my brother, and it's like you can't make up those years. Like you can't go back and just make that time up. But in between that, if he would have been that's always been my gripe with him. Like you knew, like they tell you when you come home, hey, you could just come talk and it's free.
Well, that's kind of a question that I have, and I definitely want to direct that towards you, because you said that you are the youngest and you're 30, and you said you have an older brother, and
I'm the youngest boy.
The youngest boy, but I do think that over time, that mental health has become less kind of judged. Like there was a judgment around it, which may have been, I can't speak for your family personally, but I know a lot of people, especially older than me, older than you, who didn't go. They might have known, but didn't go because of the stigma attached to it. So do you think that over time, like now that we're in 2018, about to be in 2019, that more like public service announcements are going out and more information is just circulating out there to where people don't view it as something's wrong with you. They just view it as a part of your overall health and overall well-being?
Yeah. No, I think that there is still a huge stigma around mental health. And I think depending on what cultural environment you're in, it will differ. So I think that for European American culture, therapy is much more accepted, it's much more engaged, it's much more widely used. And what we've built as therapy really was built on Western European culture. Within minority cultures, African American, Hispanic cultures, Asian cultures, it's not as widely accepted for a lot of different reasons. If we think about the military as its own culture by itself, even more so, it's not accepted. You know, when people are drafted or when they go into the military, that culture is shut down the emotion, shut down all that stuff. You got to perform. You are at war. You got to kill or be killed. There is no room for dealing with emotion. There's no room for expressing emotion. And when they come back, and it's seen as a weakness. And so when you come back stateside, for a lot of veterans, that culture has been driven into them. It's drilled into them. And so there is still, even with the VA offering counseling services, there is still this huge just kind of, there's a weakness there.
Do you think there's a pushback on it?
There's a pushback.
Yeah, like, nah, I got it.
I got it. They're not doing it. And I think too, there are so many other factors. Trust is a huge factor. When you're in the military, you learn to trust your brothers in the military. That's a different thing when you come home. There is not people that level of trust with social services, even with other individuals. It's just there's so many things that are attached to it, and so just your experience with your dad not going to therapy and not really engaging services. And I'm guessing his age is 60, 70, maybe?
My mom's 70. He's 2 years younger than my mom.
Yeah. I mean, at that time, there was even more of a taboo on therapy and doing that kind of work. So he's not alone. There are many, 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 many men and women from the military who pretty much approach it the same way.
And that's why I said, over time, because I used to hate him. And then I realized, what hate was. And then now I'm like, it's more like empathy. Like, it's still whack to me because, he's still whack. But because now you had, now that I know, and, now I was able to grow up and, express it, use the words. Versus, just pulling up and putting hands on you. I was able to use the words. I did that. And then I'm still, he's still confused. And like you said, but he Haitian. So, that cultural thing, they don't want to talk to nobody. And it's, different. And I'm like, but, it's all these people. It's like a very large family. And you've been married, mad times. You ain't try to talk to none of these people. And his second wife was a counselor at a school. You never tried. She was my brother counselor when he was in high school. And you, never tried to talk to her? No. So I look at it, especially now, and I think like I said before we went on air, with these young kids, like a lot of them view like counseling or therapy because of the generation, like literally the most immediate generation was like, that's whack. If you got to go to therapy, something really wrong with you. And they looking at them like, maybe something might really be wrong with me. Maybe I don't deserve it. And like they take it to a whole nother level. But like with the growth of social media, a lot of them use it for attention. And now it's very, very difficult like to tell the difference. And I always look like to certain people to figure that out. Like for you in particular in counseling and looking at the youth, because you are older, like what is that difference where you can tell, like, because I know it's very slight, whether it's real or whether it is for attention.
Whether someone's mental health, how they're expressing mental health is for attention or whether it's real.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so hard to tell. But even if someone is, let's say they're saying they're suicidal, let's just say that, and you want to know whether or not it's for attention or if it's real, just the fact that they are using that as a way to get attention suggests that there are other things going on for that person that need some attention. It's not that there's nothing going on, right? There are things underlying that need some attention that are not being addressed. And the only way that they feel like they can get some type of attention to pay, I'm suicidal. They may be, but they may not. But it's still a cry for help.
I think I have to agree with you, just because noticing kind of the trends that are happening, especially with social media and online, I noticed that there is, I don't know, I think there is a trend of kind of like that attention seeking, but not in the way that you normally think of when someone uses that phrase. In the way of, I noticed a trend of self-depreciating humor and things that are related to that, things of this nature that are kind of, nobody wants to talk about it because we all realize we have our own stuff going on. We all realize that, you know, you have to, life is hard. You have to do the work. Like there's a meme that constantly goes around. It's like, rise and grind, let's get this bread. And it's constantly what, if you're on social media, you've probably seen that meme. But it's the culture of, okay, I have my own issues, but so does everybody else. But I need to say something. I need to let people know somehow in a way that everything is not okay. And so memes will be posted like, oh man, I just want to jump off a cliff or whatever. Like, and it'll be disguised as like a funny picture, a GIF, a meme or something. But it is, to me, it is kind of like a cry, like somebody please notice, somebody please talk to me, just send a DM, just comment on something like, some things are not okay here. And I appreciate that so much because I feel like as the generations grow up, like the younger generation, they're more open to talking about that sort of thing. And it's kind of like their own little language that they've created amongst themselves, like to where people respond, they'll respond in their own ways. Like someone will post like a self-depreciating meme and someone will like comment with like, kind of like a mental health meme, like, oh yeah, I understand, I feel you. Like it's their own little language that they've said, okay, I see you reaching out, I feel the same way, please know you're not alone. And I don't know, it's worrisome because so many of them feel this way, but at the same time, I'm happy because the conversation is there. And between the younger crowd, the conversation is much, much more open about mental health and how everyone is feeling, as opposed to it was when I was growing up, when my parents were growing up, my grandparents, like there's a trend of like self-care, like treat yourself, as they would say, but it all goes back to mental health and just the younger generation being much more open and aware that that stuff matters. And that's what makes me kind of have a little bit of hope.
All right, so on that note, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Dr. Sonja Sutherland on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.
Some kind of angel took me out of the jungle. to your saying if only I could get over you. It's too late to know me. I'm going without you. You're saying if only. I said I'd meet you off the freeway alone. You still don't understand a woman's holding. Your fake apologies would work on the old man. I get into my car, leave you where you are. I sleep better at night without you around. Sometimes I still awake for you coming out. It's too late to hold me, too late to call me to. You're saying if only I could get over you. It's too late to know me. I'm going without you. You're saying if only. It's too late to hold me, too late to call me to. You're saying if only I could get over you. It's too late to know me. I'm going without you. You're saying if only.
Are you an entrepreneur, high-profile influencer, or creative that wants to level up in your business? If you are ready to elevate mentally, stand out visually, and dominate digitally, the Brand Doctor has the remedy. As a highly sought-after mindset coach and brand strategist, she helps clients globally to hit the ground running. Contact www.moebrandstudio.com or email getbranded@moebrandstudio.com.
Tired of doing the same old thing every Wednesday night? Well, don't. Join IBNX radio host Jason Carey every Wednesday night from 8:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. for Wild Wednesday, your midweek turn-up Wild Wednesday, featuring $5 Long Islands, $3 Jello shots, $2.50 PBR, and food specials. Wild Wednesday, with free arcade games, half-price bowling, and half-price kart racing. Wild Wednesday, featuring award-winning host and entertainer Jason Carey, Mr. Morning Coffee Swig himself, providing the soundtrack and the entertainment all night long. Playing your favorite hits of today and yesterday. Wild Wednesday with Jason Carey every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. Free entry for guests over 21 and $10 cover for anyone 20 and below. Wild Wednesday goes down at Andretti Marietta, located at 1255 Roswell Road, Marietta, Georgia. That's 1255 Marietta, Georgia, every Wednesday night. Pull up!
Hey everybody, it's Ricardo D. Rice from the Leadership Blend, simplifying your leadership. All right, everybody, welcome back to this Monday edition of the Leadership Blend with your host Ricardo D. Rice and my correspondents,
Shaib.
Michelle.
Double R.
and our very special guest.
Dr. Sonja Sutherland.
All right, so when we left, we were kind of scratching the surface of ideologies of mental health, especially in different ethnicities and different demographics. So now we're going to run into the core. So I guess my first question is, what does mental wellness look like? Like, how do you know that everything's going well and you're okay and stuff like that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the answer to that probably is different for everyone, but in general, when I think of mental and emotional wellness, I think of my ability to manage through the difficult situations in life. How well am I able to manage myself and my emotions? How aware am I of my emotions when I'm faced with very difficult situations, when I'm faced with crises? How well do I manage my interactions with other people when I'm faced with difficult situations involving other people? How aware am I of their emotions and how their emotions impact me, how my behaviors and emotions impact them, and how well am I able to manage through those things? I think a lot of those things point to mental and emotional wellness. How well am I able to manage my activities of daily living? Just the basic activities of daily living that everyone has to engage in. Or are there deficits in my ability to engage in a lot of those tasks?
Okay,
Do I
explain
see that?
When you say deficits, like
So in school, is there, how well am I able to manage my peer relationships with other students or with my teachers? Or is there a deficit? Am I frequently using anger or aggression to deal with a crisis or deal with a problem that I'm faced with? Does that show up in school? Does that show up at home? Does that show up someplace else, at church? Right? All of those things point to mental and emotional wellness.
so if you're, I guess, so it kind of goes if managing your day-to-day life and you immediately go to an extreme place, anger, wanting to fight or stuff like that, that's when it's probably an imbalance.
Well, how often you go to an extreme place, but sometimes people don't go to extreme places. Sometimes it's a complete withdrawal. That might be considered extreme, but it doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal, isolation. Sometimes it looks like schizophrenia that you might see with someone who you might see on the street, or schizophrenia of a loved one who lives with you, but is not aware of present moments, is dealing with psychosis, is dealing with all types of things. So it really just, it differs and varies from person to person what wellness looks like. You can even talk about wellness from the perspective of if I am diagnosed with a mental disorder, wellness in the context of my mental disorder might look different. Wellness may be a certain level of functioning that is as good as it's going to get for me within that diagnosis, but is different from someone else in terms of their level of functioning and what wellness might look for them. So it really varies and differs from person to person.
While we talking about, because that kind of gets into dispelling a myth or two, because I just kind of thought about it, bipolarism. We hear about it a lot, especially Jennifer Lewis talks about it a lot. What exactly is that? Like, is it split personalities? Like, what is it? Because I think there's a misconception, because I will admit I'm not exactly versed in what it is. What exactly is bipolarism?
So bipolar disorder is, depending on whether you have bipolar disorder 1 or 2, typically it varies between levels of functioning between mania, which is hyperactivity, high level of activity, or depression. So someone with bipolar disorder may range between and cycle between depression and mania over the course of time, or bipolar disorder could look like just mania at certain points in time. You think about people like Robin Williams or other, I forgot her name, another actress, Hispanic actress, I can't remember her name, but we'll just go with Robin Williams. In mania is when he was the most productive in terms of his work.
I was about to say, that's like when he was doing the things like Mrs. Doubtfire and all that other stuff.
You'll find a lot of artists in their manic phases are when they are the most creative, when they are the most musicians, when they're the most. Now everybody's not bipolar, doesn't have bipolar disorder, but for those that do, you'll find that, and then they'll have those crashes. They cycle down into depression, and then you won't see them for a while. There's no creativity in there. They're just depressed. And so they just go back and forth. So bipolar disorder typically will have those two characteristics.
So are there manifestations with bipolarism? Because like with Robin Williams, when he was, then you get Mrs. Doubtfire and some of the spin-off characters. Is that like a form of it, or a manifestation of it, or?
It just probably, I don't know how to describe that. I wouldn't say a form or a manifestation, but it was just an outgrowth. It was just what happened, what happened for him when he was manic. It was just part of that, what it looked like for him.
Okay, schizophrenia. Because I have an uncle who's schizophrenic, and we never got into exactly what we just know he talks to himself when he's even with us. He just
Mm-hmm.
kind of talks to himself or people or what exactly is schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia is a
I'm sorry, you like the encyclopedia today. I get to ask these kind of questions because you kind of know this stuff. So it's stuff that we kind of touch on, but we never get into. Like we throw these terms around, but we never actually take time to actually understand, or get some kind of concept of what it is. So you get to be the expert today because you are the expert.
Well, again, schizophrenia will look different for different people, but the typical manifestations in schizophrenia will include some psychosis, some delusionality. It may include something called catatonia, and that is when there is a loss of affect in your facial expression. You might see somebody who just kind of sits and they just kind of look like this, and there's no movement, there's no nothing. It's just like a frozen state. That's catatonia. And then there are other things you might hear: disorganized speech, inability to sit with ideas and talk their way through ideas. So there's a flight of ideas all the time. Those are some of the symptoms of schizophrenia.
Wow.
I got a question. Back to this bipolar disorder. Because in my study, I feel like we all have some of those symptoms. Like we all share where we can be all the way up, and then sometimes we're all the way down. And we're seeing, like she said, like especially now in social media, it's kind of one of those things where it's becoming super popular to be like, oh, I'm bipolar, so that's what's wrong with me. And we're seeing like people get a pass for it, and it might not. They're adding to like the stigma of being bipolar. Like you ain't really bipolar. Like we don't know what that is, but you're not really that. And they're adding to that. With those symptoms, like because it'll always go back to the question, especially like with the people that I be around in these streets. Their number one question is, how can you tell if it's real when all you see is like,
Yeah. Typically, a couple of things. One, historically, bipolar disorder has been completely overdiagnosed. Completely overdiagnosed, especially in children and especially in minority children. So that's one thing to think about. And so I think that contributes to what you're talking about. Everybody's saying that they're bipolar and this.
yeah, it's like a cultural thing.
It's like a cultural thing. The other thing is you should not consider yourself to have bipolar disorder until you've been diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. It's the up and down that we typically experience just in life in general, related to situational things that may occur. Maybe somebody passes away, or maybe we're dealing with some relationship stress, or different things like that, where people will have ups and downs. That's different than a cycle of mania and hypomania that is not influenced by situational factors, right? Bipolar disorder is not influenced by situational factors necessarily.
So you're always like that. That's just how you operate. If devoid of something stepping in, like death of a
It
family
can
member or
happen
something.
devoid of something stepping in, yes.
And then be worse when it happens. So like people will be like extremely depressed, and then somebody die, and then they're the total opposite. And then people like be trying to figure it out. Like I know it's a couple of people in my family. Like I used to always try to figure out like what wrong with bro. And in our community, they just be like, yo, he crazy. He crazy. That's the stigma of like being bipolar, being schizophrenic, because we in our community, in the black community, especially like in certain parts of this country, like I'm from a part in Florida, like they go drink it away and then they sleep and then they better. Or like here in Georgia where my mom from, like they go drink it away or they smoke it away and then they better. And you start to realize, like, as you watch it over time and then you start seeing it in other people, like, no, the drink didn't make it go away. It probably made it worse. But that's kind of like how we view it. Like, nah, he'll be all right. That uncle, he'll look crazy. And I always look at it like, and they make fun of it. Like, they put it in the movies and they put it on TV. Like, nah, that's just uncle over there. He'll be all right. He'll look crazy. He'll look crazy. Instead of saying, hey, maybe we should really look at them, or maybe we should talk to them, or try to take them to go. Like you said, that wellness. We've never like studied wellness. It was just like, hey, we should be healthy, and then we forget like mental health is a part of being healthy. And then they separate it and say like, well, there's mental wellness and then there's mental health. Like, no, just be well. Like, you go to the doctor to be well. You make sure you go to the dentist. Like, if you don't talk at home, you need to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the question is, why is there such a stigma in the minority community on seeking mental health and stuff like that? Why do you think there's such a stigma on it? Just like, because when I was graduating from high school, you were getting into the field in '98. So why do you think there's such a stigma on mental health in minority communities, in your opinion?
Well, I think there's probably lots of contributing factors. I think one factor has to do with, a lot of what we've seen over the years in minority communities is connection with social service agencies. There's a lot of distrust in the minority communities when you talk about child and family services, DJJ, all of those kind of social service agencies. Some of the interventions that are connected with being involved in those social service agencies has to do with therapy. So that mistrust kind of slides its way on into therapy because it's connected or coming at folks from within those connection with those agencies. That's one idea. Another is typically what we understand is that the way that the field of psychology evolved, as I said before, was really Western European culture. There are cultural barriers that exist because a lot of that was normed on a culture that's not ours. There are a lot of things that are typical treatment protocol that are not adjusted to really be relevant and applicable within minority culture. And so there's a disconnect when you try to apply an intervention based on a different culture on another culture. And so the effectiveness varies just because if intervention is not culturally relevant, if it's not culturally sensitive, if it's not culturally and collaboratively developed with people within minority cultures, then it's sometimes just, it doesn't apply as well. It doesn't work as well. And so I think that's part of what some of the disconnect has been as well.
I do have a question. Do you think that access to healthcare is also...
Access is huge.
Right, like contributing kind of to that stigma just because... Like, I know during our
lack
break...
of access.
Right,
Yes.
correct. The lack of access. Because I know during our break, we kind of talked about the statistics and the different... looking at the different groups and their suicide
Yeah, I want to
rates.
hear these statistics. I had to step out. What were these statistics?
Nah, they crazy numbers.
This was by AFSP.org about suicide statistics, and this report was from 2016, end of 2016, going into 2017. And it's looking at the suicide rates by ethnicity from 2000 all the way into 2016, with Asian, Pacific Islander, and Black people actually having the lowest rates, and white as well as American Indian people having the highest rate, with whites leading with the highest rates, which is interesting to me. But what I want to know is that lack of access to healthcare, is that contributing to maybe why like other minorities won't get checked out? Maybe they don't have the funds to go ahead and set up a copay and go to a doctor and then go see a specialist and then pay for that as well. Like maybe that's contributing, and maybe that's why, like you said, we'll go smoke it away, we'll go drink it away, you'll be all right, just, here's an eighth, like you'll feel fine in the morning, like, and then you don't feel fine in the morning. And when you don't, and you continue to have these effects of certain, like, certain aspects that come along with certain things, whether it is BPD or other things, that's when people just write you off and label you as crazy. Like, how do you feel about that, and how can we fix that lack of access? I don't know if that's really like your specialty or your field. That's probably administration, but
Yeah, fixing lack of access is a wider societal, institutional level problem that has to be addressed on multiple levels. And I agree with you. I think lack of access is huge. I think when we talk about the idea that people, minorities may smoke it away or drink it away and not use that money. I mean, if there's money to smoke it away or drink it away, then there's money to go to therapy. Well, maybe, maybe not, right? But the other piece of it is also this idea that therapy is for white people. You think about it, you look at it on
Agreed.
television, right?
I was about to say that.
Agreed.
You know, white people are going for therapy. Black people aren't going for therapy on TV,
Yeah,
right? And people
even
get a
when you
lot of
look at
their
the numbers.
ideas from television as well. Most historically, therapists have been white, right? There's a huge dearth of minority therapists in the field. That's another barrier, right?
I think-
White person not going to really understand.
That goes back to that trust factor that
Goes
you
back
were
to
saying.
the trust factor. Yeah.
Like, how can you relate when there's so many, just without being in a patient-client aspect, just relating one-on-one, just in everyday life. There's so many things that you have to kind of cover, kind of like a mini education you have to go over before you can really begin to relate for most white people to other ethnicities, that in a span of 45 minutes in an office, it's really hard to break all of those barriers and then get to the root of the issue with clear empathy and understanding.
And have them come back.
Correct.
Like, I remember the movie, I forgot with Morgan Freeman in the 90s where he was a principal. But,
Lean on me.
Yeah. But, like, even if you look at, like, that situation, like him being in that school, like, the counselor wasn't black. And it looked like crazy because you see it in a lot of these movies, like a lot of great movies. And you look at them like, man, we was doing it. But then when you really study the film, and you like, hold on, like he was in this is all white, an all black or demographic or a Hispanic demographic, and it's like a white counselor. What you think you gonna tell them? How you think they look at you? Because the person that's talking to them don't look like them. So the person that they introduce to the school, they like, well, you don't even understand what I'm going through. So why do I need to talk to you?
And I agree. Like, I think that goes back where you were saying that there's an entire, like, dearth of ethnic psychiatrics or psychologists who can help. Like, I know personally, just like with the time limit that just passed with our healthcare.gov and finding your primary care, for me personally, I like all of my physical doctors to be women of color, because Black women are constantly, I believe, like in danger in the medical industry where they're not listened to and their concerns are not taken seriously. So for me, as my preference, I look for PCPs who are women of color. So if I were to have a psychologist, I'd look for that as well. But if I don't know where to look, where to find a Black female psychologist who may understand me to where I could feel comfortable the moment I step in the office, then I might give up on it as a whole, or I might just have to settle for something different, but then maybe stop going after a couple weeks because I don't feel as if I don't trust
comfortable.
them and I don't feel as if they're understanding. So for our listeners listening who are Asian or Black or Hispanic, what is a good resource for them to find psychologists that can relate to them more?
Yeah. One resource that I know African American women can look for, or minority women, is Therapy for Black Girls. That is a listserv or a listing of all minority therapists, psychologists, master's level therapists, and that's a good resource to use. Psychology Today, you're able to see the pictures of the individuals that you're looking up for their specialty, and you'll know what their race is before you even call. And so that's helpful for anybody of any gender and race. So those are two resources that folks can look for.
Okay, you said that was Therapy for Black Girls?
Therapy for Black Girls.
Okay.
Okay, so I know you have to get out here. So I want to get into the whole holiday thing. All right, so I know that on a day-by-day living is hard enough for individuals who are mental well and unmentally well.
Yeah.
So how does the holidays compound in that? Because I know that that's a big family time. And how does the holidays compound in that for somebody who may or may not be mentally stable?
Yeah, and you may or may not is right, because it can be equally stressful and anxiety-producing and filled with depression for people who don't have official mental health diagnoses, as well as for people who have mental health diagnoses. And you can look for things like loneliness. You can look for things like sadness, just tension, fatigue, just kind of isolation. All of those are things that will potentially point to someone who may be struggling during the season. Earlier, I think you may have been talking about, if I heard you correctly, losing someone
Yeah.
and dealing with that during the holidays, right? Though that's something that can really, really be impactful. If you've recently lost someone and now you're coming up on the first holiday after that person has passed away, that's going to be very difficult, right? There's potential for increased depression for that individual and mediating what is this holiday going to look like without this person, right? And so sometimes folks in that situation are really trying to work through, and hopefully they're getting some counseling. They've gone to a grief group or gone to individual counseling to do some grief work, and they're working towards accepting the loss of that person and that this holiday will not be with this person. And maybe they are hopefully working towards creating new traditions, something that would honor that person. Maybe there was a cause that that person really held dear to their heart, and maybe a new tradition is started involving that. You know, it could be any number of things, but that's something that really you want to look for. In your statistic, you were talking about how high the suicide rate was for older individuals, people
Yes.
above the age of.
It's the
Over
elderly, really. It's the 75 to 84 age range. And 1 second. So the highest rates of suicide is 85 and older.
Mm-hmm.
Like elderly people who are 85 and older, which to me was shocking because in my mind I'm thinking you've lived your life, like you've reached a full life, you've gotten to the end of it.
As if they have no regrets, right? And you know, at that age, our society is very different now than it used to be. It used to be that older people were held close to the family.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that, you know, my grandmother lived with me and my mom when I was growing up. My mother lived with me and my children and with my brother between us, you know, when she was older. But that's not typical anymore. And so a lot of times older people are very isolated. They're very lonely. They may be poor, right? If they're not working anymore, if they haven't saved money, there are a lot of things that are happening for older people. If they have regrets about, you know, how life went, maybe they're not with their family, just a lot of different things. Maybe the spouse is gone and it's just me now, and I'm 80 and my wife or husband of how long is now gone, and my children in another state. So many things. Then you come to the holidays, right? You come to the holidays, and that feeling of loneliness and isolation is just expounded, is just exponentially larger than before. And then you can kind of get a sense of why those numbers might be the way they are, right? Maybe I'm older and my physical body is it's just gone. I can't do it anymore. I'm sick. I can't do it anymore. I've lived a long life, but I can't do this piece of it anymore. There's so many things that could be contributing to that. And at the holidays, it can be worse. It can be worse.
So I've heard that there are stages of grief.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go over that really quickly? Like if just the stages of grief, because I know that's one of the major factors that I've run across in the holidays. Like you said, the matriarch or the patriarch's gone, and now the family's kind of scattered, or you know, so it's just like, okay, I really can't grieve because let's say I'm the oldest and I'm trying to keep the fragments of the family together. So what is that? You know, some coping mechanisms or something like that.
So first, there'll be denial that what has transpired, that this is real. So there's denial around that. And, you know, the stages of grief will be different in length for every person, and it's not linear. You can go through the stages, go back and forth, and so there's denial. Then there may be some anger about what has transpired. So there's not denial anymore, but now I'm just pissed off, and I don't understand why this is happening, right? Then there's some bargaining. Okay, maybe, you know, maybe this is not real. Maybe something else could happen. Maybe this, or so then maybe some bargaining with God and just kind of, right? So I don't understand this. Help me understand this. Then there could be moving to just a beginning level of acceptance that, okay, this is it. There's no going back. I can't really refute this anymore, right? Those are amongst the stages of grief.
Wow. Okay. So one last question: if somebody is deciding to seek some counseling, is there some kind of expectation they should have? Actually, before that, we were talking about the difference in races and the barriers. So should an African American look for an African American first, or does it matter? Is there some kind of something else they should look for people who've never considered mental health and maybe decide maybe I should, go look for somebody? How should that look? Like,
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. I don't know that I would say that race should be the first thing that you look for. I think it should be a factor, but I don't know that it's the first thing that you should look for. You want to look for someone potentially who specializes in whatever concern you may have. So there are people who will specialize in eating disorders. If your issue is an eating disorder, you want to look for that person. That person may not be black or Hispanic. They may be white, but for that specific disorder, you want somebody who has that specialty. For example, you want to spend some time choosing multiple people that have histories of working with certain types of populations. So if you go on Psychology Today, for example, therapists will list, I work with this disorder, I work with that disorder, I work with depression, I work with anxiety. I've done this for how many years. You want to kind of see what's their experience. You want to choose a few and you want to talk to all of them. You are in charge of choosing the person that's right for you. You do not have to see the first person that you come across. Talk to them. Ask them. Talk to me for 10 minutes on the phone, 15 minutes on the phone, a free consultation. And let me get a feel of who you are.
Most
and
of them do
whether or
that?
not. Anybody who won't do it, you don't need to see them.
Okay.
It's my opinion that anybody who won't talk to you for 10 minutes on the phone to let you know who they are, just as an initial screening, to kind of know, is there like can we vibe a little bit? Is there a little bit of, I'm probably not going to see that person. I'm going to see somebody that will at least give me the courtesy of talking to me on the phone before telling me come in and giving you $100 or $150 just to find out if we're a good fit or not. So definitely you want to talk to 2 or 3 people. And then of the 2 or 3 people that you talk to, whichever one you seem to feel the best connection with, that might be the person that you choose to make an appointment with to go in for your first session. And that could be you may find that as somebody within your race and you may not. It just depends. I had a white counselor and she was great.
Oh, really?
Really.
So you're saying the overall issue, your overall concerning issue is what you should lead with,
Yes.
followed by maybe a couple of other factors.
Yes.
What if it's general? Like, what if you just feel like you should go in, but you can't pinpoint exactly what you probably want to go in for? So is there like general practitioners that you can go to?
General, mental, physical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are people who just are general and don't have a specialty per se, and yeah, you'll find them. And most anyone most any counselor is trained to be a generalist first, then they add on specialty areas. So, yeah, but it is helpful when you can see somebody within your race who understands the perspectives that you have. That does not say that anybody in your race or everybody in your race can understand your perspective. That is not the case.
Correct.
Right? So that's why you want to talk to multiple people and kind of get a sense of who it is.
So always get a second opinion. That's something that my
Third
my
or
parents
fourth
will,
opinion.
exactly. It's something my parents will tell me all the time. Like always, especially when it comes to your health, your overall being, get a second opinion.
All right. So before you go, tell us about your show, so that people tell us about your show. Like, what does your show do? What do you talk about?
So we talk about mental and emotional wellness, and we talk about family relationship wellness, and we talk about how not just education on mental and emotional wellness, and talk about different disorders, and talk about how that impacts individuals, but we talk about how some of those impact the family as well. We talk about what it takes to have healthy family functioning with just in general, couples, parents, and children, siblings, single parents, divorced parents and children. But we also talk about it from the perspective of what happens when addiction hits your family, or what happens when eating disorders hit your family, or what happens when schizophrenia hits your family. We talk about it from multiple perspectives with the hope of helping people gain tools that they can use in their families in practical ways to help them improve their relationships, and also give them a better understanding of what mental health is, what emotional health is, take the stigma away from mental health, and help people understand that probably everybody that you talk to has something happening for them on a mental and emotional level, and you just don't really know it. And it may be that you just aren't necessarily aware of what's happening within you to know that this is something that maybe you could talk to somebody about, and just stabilize and get some more help in terms of just being able to function even more effectively in the world. And so those are the things that we talk about.
You have a practice too, right? You have your own practice?
I do have a private practice in Hiram, yes.
All right. So how do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you or stuff of that magnitude? What's your information?
So I have a private practice in Hiram where I have therapists who see folks. I am today, in this moment, not taking any new clients because I'm at my max.
She's a busy woman, you guys. She's
She's in
But-
the
demand.
woman. She's the woman.
But I have really good therapists at my Hiram location. And so if folks want to connect with a therapist or investigate therapy, they can look up legacychangerscounseling.org. And that's our website, legacychangerscounseling.org. And kind of see all the therapists that we have there and the specialties that they have there. I teach at Richmond Graduate University now, and that's primarily what I focus on, as well as supervision of therapists post licensure or post graduation as they kind of work their way towards licensure and getting them ready to work on their own.
You're so inspiring.
I know.
All right. So what's your final thought to the people before you leave? She has to leave us, people. So what's your final thought to the people?
Well, I think if we are talking about the holidays and wanting to be as healthy as we can, or at least work through the holidays in a healthy way or be well during the holidays, one, don't isolate. Surround yourself with people who love you, people who genuinely care about you. Don't overdo it. A lot of times there's a lot of pressure during the holidays that causes stress, that causes depression, to do everything, to shop, to cook, to go to the parties, to do all of that kind of stuff. And it can be so overwhelming and so tiring and so just
I'm very happy you
stressful.
said that. Like, the expectations of the holidays, unreal, especially now.
Yeah.
I stand by that advice.
Yeah, all
Thank
of that
you.
can impact your mood in a lot of ways. And so just be careful not to overextend yourself. Take it easy, keep it simple, say no to a couple of things, and just do enough to enjoy the holidays and be with the people that you love. If you are struggling because you have lost someone, or if you're struggling with depression, or if you're struggling with suicide, don't isolate. Find people who will surround you. Be aware of what's happening internally for you. Keep your routines the same. A lot of times, so like for me, I'm out of school, right, because we have break, right? But I have a routine, right? But now I've got all this time on my hands, so I need to make sure that I'm filling my time with activities to keep me from isolating, because I'm empty nester. My girls are older, right? And so it's just me. So I want to be proactive, and people in situations like that want to be proactive about engaging. Go volunteer to do something. Go to a free concert. Go hang out with friends. Plan to be engaged and not isolate. Just be aware. Just be aware, and just don't overdo it. Don't overdo it.
All right, so special thanks to the doctor in the house, Dr. Sonja Sutherland, for sitting in on the show today. She has to leave us, but stick around Leadership In, because when we come back, Kelly Jenkins joins us to talk more about mental health in the holidays on the Leadership In with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I was so foolish to ever leave your side.
ocean, traveling in slow motion, paddling with no question, early morning with the sun, not yet burning, innocent, but trying to be a good son, myself 100%, oh. I feel it inside. I wanna reach that. It's somewhere inside. I wish I reached that. Skyline, skyline. I wanna reach that skyline. Skyline. I wish I reached that skyline. Skyline, I'm gonna reach that skyline. Skyline. Endless struggles to go through. They are strewn in the city. Daily struggle to be true. Betrayed authenticity. Poison well around but still. I will take another round. Or another ride until we take off from the ground. I feel it inside. I wanna reach that. It's somewhere inside. I wish I reached that. Reach that skyline. Skyline. I wanna reach that skyline. Skyline. I wish I reached that skyline. Skyline. I wanna reach that skyline.
Skyline, inside, see the skyline. 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 Inside, see the skyline.
Hey everybody, it's Ricardo D. Rice from the Leadership Blend, airing every Monday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. on IBNX Radio Talk in.
All right, everybody, we are back on this Monday edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my correspondents,
Shaib.
Michelle.
All right, so we just made a switch out. Like I told y'all, the doctor had to leave because, she's a busy woman, and we're so happy to have her. Again, remember, on Mondays from 10 to 12, Dr. Sonja Sutherland's show airs right before mine on Monday. So she was airing right before I came on today on IBNX Radio Network. So you definitely want to listen in. She's an amazing person. She has an amazing point of view. And now we're going to switch gears and we're going to get the practical stuff that you will see on a day-to-day basis. We have a specialist here today. Mrs. Kelly Jenkins is in the studio with us today. So we're excited to have her. See, this is what I tell people. So, social media, people, is your friend. I think I put up a post, and I was like, hey, I want to do a topic on mental health, and it's not in my wheelbarrow. I have 1 or 2 people, but I want to get as many people as I can. And this lovely young lady answered, and she was diligent about that thing, and I love when people are diligent. That tells me they have something to say. And, that's what these platforms are for, to give people the space to say what they need to say. So, Mrs. Jenkins, tell us about you.
All right. Well, honestly, I just recently moved to Georgia in August.
From where?
Indiana.
Indiana. What is out there? What is out there in Indiana?
I was going to say something else, but I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Okay.
Because my question was, I didn't know we were out there. I didn't know we were out there.
We out there.
We representing?
Little sections.
About to say,
Okay.
we clearly cannot be the majority out there, but okay.
But I'm actually glad to be in Georgia. I love the light, the atmosphere, the whole entire vibe. I came and visited a few times before I moved, and I think I made the right choice. So
we won you over.
How long you been here?
Since August.
Oh, you literally just got here.
She's new, y'all. She's new.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yes.
All right. So tell me about your background.
So right now I'm currently a licensed occupational therapist.
What does that mean?
So my main focus right now, and I'm working in dementia setting. But before, and pretty much what I do is help set up daily living, new ways of thinking. We implement tasks for our dementia patients, but as well, before I worked in mental health. And pretty much what we did there is kind of help them with different coping skills. We helped them with finding resources for when they did leave the facility, to help them with their mental health. We also helped them find new ways of thinking, making sure that they know their triggers, and making sure that they know kind of what their mental health is and how they can proceed in the community daily life with it as well.
Now, it's interesting that you use that word triggers, because I know there's been a lot of talk about that word. Oh, everyone's using it. People are just being special snowflakes or whatever it is. Explain, please, if you will, what a trigger is and why it's important and why that's such a hot button word nowadays.
So I feel like, to me, a trigger is something that kind of sets us off. Like for me, when I was dealing with depression, being in really big areas where there was way too many people, where I had to interact constantly when I knew that I wasn't in that good mindset, that was a trigger for me. It would automatically make me want to step back, close off. Make me not want to, go out. If I knew there was going to be a big gathering places, I never wanted to go to them. Because I knew that was a trigger to bring back a part of me that felt like, well, you should only be here if you're feeling happy or in a good mood, or, and now I have to put on some type of mask that I didn't want to have to put on. Mm-hmm. So to me, that was a trigger for me. And a lot of times when we tell people triggers, it is just something for them to look at. Like, if you have, say, an addiction or something with alcohol, you don't want to go to a place where they're selling lots of alcohol, or that's a place. Yeah, that's a trigger. Something is happening. So you want to stay clear of those things, or at least if you know what your trigger is, be mindful, have a way to deal with it before, you go there.
So it's like the mental switches or buttons you have that shouldn't be touched.
Right.
Like, gotcha.
All right, so you said that you had a stint with depression.
Yes.
So
yes.
Let's get into that. Let's get into that.
I didn't really want to tell people, but during my time of depression, and it's funny because I didn't even realize how depressed I was until I started working in mental health.
Really?
Yes. Because you don't really think that it's depression. You just think, oh, I'm just having a bad mood or a bad day. This is just a feeling. But no, I was actually depressed. I didn't want to go places. I didn't want to do things. I remember sleeping one day until 6 o'clock. And then, even then, I didn't want to eat. Holidays came around, I didn't want to join, movie gather. Anything I just didn't want to go to. But I just thought, this is just the process. I just, nothing's wrong with me. But there really was. I was really depressed. And I think a lot of that had a lot of triggers. I lost both my parents, as well as divorce. So there were so many new changes going on that I was just I didn't know how to handle them or cope with what was happening. So I kind of just really isolated myself and shut everybody out. You know, I only kind of made them think I was happy, told them what they felt they needed to know, but not any further into it.
And it's so funny, before you came on, the advice that our first guest had given us was not to isolate yourself.
Please
to put
don't.
yourself around people who are kind of going to hold you accountable and make sure that you're doing okay. So it's that isolation that really sounds like it gets to people, like wanting to withdraw, but like fighting that urge and making sure that you don't do that.
Yeah, that was something big for me, and just also learning about that. I always tell people, if you're feeling down, please don't isolate yourself. You should have somebody accountable or support, you know, somebody that's going to call and check on you, like, hey, I haven't heard from Kelly or so-and-so in a day or two, or if you don't want to make sure they're okay. So, you know, that was important for me to stop isolating myself, but because I was so depressed, I didn't realize it. You know, I didn't realize I didn't want to be around other people. And it was more so because I didn't want to answer the questions as well. I didn't want to go through the process. I didn't want to have to explain. Kind of just wanted to be, you know, to myself.
So the holidays, you said especially the holidays. What is it about the holidays?
I think for me, but for others, the holidays are supposed to solidify happiness, togetherness, family, love. You know, if you think about the end of the year, we got like some of the biggest holidays that are supposed to be all about love and happiness. You know, you got Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, and Valentine's Day. Like,
I know, right? Back to back. Shoot, Valentine's Day alone is enough to pressure if you're single.
Exactly.
Thanks to Walmart and
Single lady in the house, Valentine's Day can be just
I'm
as
single.
special.
I'm just saying,
take
like
yourself
that.
out,
Right,
lady.
I'm just saying.
Put on that dress.
Oh, please.
Take
Don't we really
yourself
see? We
out.
still spilling that?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Do
grief.
your hair,
yes.
ladies, because no one's gonna take care of you like you.
Exactly,
Oh, good grief.
exactly. And I had to learn, you know, the holidays stopped being so much of what I felt like they were supposed to be. So, you know, Valentine's Day, I love love. You know, despite whatever I may be feeling, you know, I do want to go out and, you know, enjoy myself. It doesn't have to be so much with a person. You know what I mean? Things that we also taught people is set realistic goals and plan ahead, like Christmas. Everybody's so worried about spending all this money and looking
going in
perfect.
debt.
Yeah, and it's like, just set realistic expectations. You know, if you know you can't do it, don't do it. Or put a budget or put a timeline. You know, a lot of times there's a lot of family gatherings and events. I started telling myself, look, I got 1 hour.
You gave it a time limit?
Yeah, I gave it a time limit because it was just, that's my way of being able to deal with it. I didn't want to, you know, overextend, because if I overextended myself, then, you know, then I was putting myself in a situation I may not want it to be in later. So I just kind of would put time limits on it, or set a realistic goal. Like, maybe I don't want to spend the whole weekend there. Maybe if I just come a day, hang out with family, laugh, you know, have a good time, then I'm, you know, want to go back to my support, my space.
So you said there were like expectations around the holidays that kind of go into like contributing to like certain forms of depression. Do you think like those expectations kind of bring about a sense of guilt, maybe like, oh, I'm not doing as much as I should, like I'm not as happy as I should be, like you're not participating in kind of like this marketed vibe of the holidays, so to speak?
Yes, that is very, very true. So many people that I even talk to now or be around that are depressed or down, it's because of the expectations. Like, they're supposed to have their life together, or they're supposed to be happy. Their kids are supposed to have maybe 20 presents under the tree. You know, just stuff that's shouldn't be, you know, the topic of the holidays. And even there's time, you know, I have children. I know how stressful that can be, trying to give them everything that, you know, and I had to start being realistic, and I even started being realistic with my children, you know. Look, this is what we can do, this is what this is, you know. But we started having other things on Christmas, like we always baked cookies and watched movies, and that was our thing.
It's funny you said that, because I'm literally this afternoon about to go bake cookies with my little sister.
You do realize it's not Christmas, right?
She's never, well,
It's
no,
not
she's
Christmas.
in school. Okay, she's young, she's in school, and the kids are having, like, you know, towards the end of the year, they have their holiday party.
Right.
And so I told her I'd help her with the cookies, and she told me she'd never made cookies from scratch. And I love to bake. Baking is, like, kind of one of my hobbies, but it's kind of like a passion of mine, because I would be in my mom's house and I'd be baking. Like, she'd come in every day during the holidays and be like, you made cupcakes yesterday, now it's brownies. Like, so I told her, don't give me that look,
I
Ricardo.
don't cook,
It's
so
delicious.
The only thing I'm contemplating doing is going to get me another patty pie.
Oh my!
I finally
That's
had
a whole
one.
show in
Is that
itself.
what's a patty pie?
The patty
patty
sweet
pie?
potato pie.
Oh,
they
see, I
sell
never
it.
had one.
Oh no, I got.
I didn't either until
Uh-uh.
this Thanksgiving, and
I
now
gotta bring this
there's
up.
crack in it, and
Yes.
now I'm like, I gotta go buy.
Patty
I never had
pie.
that.
Okay, so we went for Thanksgiving, and my sister's soon-to-be mother-in-law at some point brought 2 family-sized patty pies. So my sister was like, "Well, just take one home." Like, I'm not gonna eat this pie. That pie lasted barely a week. Like, it became my nightly snack. So now I'm feeding for a patty pie that I have to go get.
Okay.
Like, I have to get it. You really had to pull it up?
Yeah, the patty.
Oh my God, you really had to pull it
Yes,
up?
the patty's pie. Okay, she made.
I seen those. They were selling at Walmart.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I never had
Go,
one though.
go get. Okay, so after the show today, this is your homework, right?
Okay, Patty. So
Your
Michelle is
homework,
really,
right?
she's really driving it home.
After the
for
show,
you.
go pick one up.
Go
Okay,
get a patty pie.
Get you some. Okay, because I see you're melanated, so some butter pecan, not vanilla ice cream, butter pecan
Love butter
ice
pecan.
cream.
That's the best.
There you
Okay,
go.
well, I didn't have ice cream in mine, but okay.
Heat it up. Put 1 scoop on top. You're good. That's your afternoon.
That's
Happy
Ma'am.
holidays.
What is happening right now?
Happy holidays.
What is happening right now? What?
She's showing good things to do. You know.
Yeah,
No, I
be
don't
around people you love.
I don't
It's
think
the
we want to
holidays.
encourage people who
Don't
are depressed to eat.
No. Don't isolate yourself. Go bring it to the
Go
family.
to
Let
it.
everyone enjoy a
Who's
slice
gonna
of patty
do-
pie, and you guys sit there. Maybe watch The Grinch Before Christmas,
Exactly.
the classic one. You know.
Your
You
level
already
of
know he's not going to
ridiculousness.
share that. You already know he's not going to share that.
I'm just, you're not gonna.
Yeah,
the
I'm
holidays is about sharing. What are you talking about?
He ain't going to do it, though.
Wow.
I mean, I have to concur. I don't.
You don't
Yeah, I
share.
don't. I'm not sharing my patty pie.
Hey, it's
Now
the
I gotta
holidays.
try it because
The
I gotta
holidays is for
know
sharing.
what
No,
is it.
But it all
What's
depends.
for certain food, you're
It
not
all
gonna give it up.
depends because my grandma had a fit because she was
Okay.
like, that patty pie, it don't taste like mine.
Well, right,
It's
right.
all bland.
You brought it around, Grandma. What's wrong with you?
I didn't buy it. My sister had it.
Oh, my goodness.
And grandma usually makes. She was already bitter because she usually makes the desserts.
Oh my.
And she made them, but in addition, my sister brought us 2. Well, she didn't
You
buy them. Her
don't-
soon-to-be mother-in-law brought them, so she had them just to,
Listen.
just to have.
Don't bring the patty pie around, Grandma, great auntie. Look,
Anybody that cooks,
don't do it. Okay, just have it. You know, with a select
I
few.
mean, I don't cook, so it's a
I was
godsend
like,
for
I'm
me.
not a big cooker. You know.
See, I'm not cooking, so it was a
big
godsend for
cooker.
me. I'm just like, I can have sweet potato pie when I want it, thanks to Patty LaBelle, who I adore.
Oh my.
I'm about that life.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying. All right, so you said that at your job, or your previous job, that you saw the intake process, like what they
Yes,
would do.
yes.
What does that look like?
So we always, it's not funny, but we every year around November we were like, all right, here's the time. That's the time we would get slammed. We would get swarmed with, and mainly a lot of times we dealt with a lot of depression, bipolar, and a lot of schizophrenia around that time. We also had a separate unit that dealt with suicidal thoughts as well. So we would get pretty slammed all winter months, like from November to like the end of February. And basically what that looked like is they would come in, they would speak with the psychiatrist, they would get, set up with doctors and, all that. By the time they gave up to the unit with us, we would kind of get a packet, we would go in and we would sit with them, just kind of talk to them about what happened. So we would let them explain to, what happened, why they ended up coming in, what ended up going on around that time, what was the thought process, and then we would implement groups. So throughout the day, there were groups they had to attend. So whether it was like a money management group, coping skills group, reflecting group, therapy group. So they had like music therapy, art therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy.
You in this hand thing. I can hear. I'm like, what is that noise? I'm like, it's her.
She's letting you know.
Yes.
She's letting you know.
The noise, bam, bam. I'm like, what is that noise?
Yeah, they would do that. And sun, a lot of people don't realize like light therapy is important because, back home, the winter months, it would get really dark. And the times when it's dark, a lot of people get depressed.
That is something that people really don't. I don't hear that talked about enough because it happens. Like, I'll even notice with myself, like, and I'm a person who loves rainy days over sunny days. But during the summer, when we go through those scents of rain that get to be too much, I'll notice my mood kind of drop. And I'm like, if this is happening to me, a fairly
happening.
neurotypical person, then I can only imagine.
Yes.
Like seasonal disorder that would affect quite a couple of people.
Yes, being stuck. And then a lot of people believe, like, if you are in snow or rain, I'm just going to sit in the house. I don't really want to go out. Well, guess what? Then that
contributes to the isolation.
Exactly. Then now you're isolated. Now you're sitting in the house. And so we would try to take them out. We had a really big sunroom. So we would let them go out in the sunroom. You know, we play music. They would get to work on their activities. Journals, we would do a lot of writing so that they can write down their thoughts. And every week we went through the same process, and they would come in and we would talk. And we would talk about moods. We would go over like our different moods and what does it mean to us, what's going on. So we did a lot more just kind of trying to get them to do new ways of thinking so that when they did get out, they had good, strategies to use. We also would make sure that they talked to their families. So before we let them discharge, we would have a meeting with the families. And what that did was they kind of had that time to explain to their families or friends or loved ones what was going on, what's happening, this is what they've been working on, this is what they're doing, so that they can help. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times people with mental health don't want to tell other people what's going on. And it's important to have your family or someone involved. Someone there to be there, to hold you, like you said, accountable, or to have, be that support system, or that you can just talk to because you feel like, I can't talk to anyone, but I know I told, Jessica or whoever about this, and I know if I go to her, she'll be able to kind of be there for me. And then we would also set them up with groups or places they can go to outside of the facility, to have group therapy or counseling. So,
would you say it's important to have like family? Does it have to be blood family? Because I know the holidays is tough for some people. Some people don't have great relationships with blood families. If you have just your support system around you, can that kind of be like a family like you choose?
Yes. Whoever they felt was that support system is who we brought in. So it didn't have to necessarily be mom or dad or sister or brother, cousin. Sometimes it were classmates because we would have college kids. We would have, sometimes it would be classmates. Sometimes it would be a counselor that they were very close with. Sometimes it would be a friend or a neighbor or a church member that came. So it didn't really matter about if it was family as long as you had that support.
Okay. All right. All right. So on that note, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have more with Mrs. Kelly Jenkins on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.
I can't believe you have not.
That's why I love the moon. Every night it's there for you. It's constant. Unlike these human beings who lie about what it seems to be. You think the earth is where you stand. That's why I love the moon, 'cause it's always there for me. Every night about my window, and that's why I love the moon, 'cause it's always there for me. Every single night I look outside, it's right there for me in my mind, and that's why I love the moon, yeah. Because people can consume my love in the wrong way, so I send it up at night, at night, at night. Real love so hard to find. Just when you think you found it, the illusions in your eyes, it blinds. So be careful where you look for love. Just be careful where so hard to find. Just when you think you found it, the illusions in your eyes, it blinds us all. So be careful where you look for love. Just be careful where you look for love. That's why I let the moon shine. Cause through the time I've been confused on how to move. Stuck in between what wasn't and what could be the truth. High, still up trying to escape the demons in my room. You see, it's no chains dropping, we learn to maintain. And how could anybody else for pain when they brainwash us and watch us every time we make exchanges of slaves? Locked in a box and use our minds just to escape all the same shit. I'm tired of the pain, love is blind to the flame. That's why I look up, never hide behind the skies in the rain. Promises cooked up, exercising, don't deny you the pain. That's why I look for ways to find whatever lies in the rain. Cause shit changed. I don't blame my father for lamping, I believe that help. With me trying to grow as just still trying to grow as myself. So understand it when I'm stranded, taking chances, know I need that. Full fell on my back, who's just relax and keep your seat back. Cause when you think, that's when you let time run and escape with your mind, loving, that's what you think. So what you think? If love was easy to find, we wouldn't need it to complete our lives. So peace to the moon, peace to the stars, peace to Saturn, and peace to Mars.
Hey everybody, it's Ricardo D. Rice from the Leadership Blend, where we're simplifying your leadership.
All right, everybody, welcome back to this Monday edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my correspondent,
Shaib.
Michelle.
and our very special guest, Mrs.
Kelly.
All right, so when we were on a break, we were going at it about desserts. I don't know why. I don't even know how we got there, but we were talking about desserts, and there's just like a plethora of desserts that we were going between. I think because we were talking about holidays, so we were talking about patty pies and
Pies.
cheesecakes and stuff that's really making me hungry that we probably shouldn't have got into. Probably should not have got into. All right, so you know, you saw the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So does it normally take somebody having triggers for them to finally say, I need to go seek help? Or is there like a breaking point? I guess the question is, I couldn't really get verbalized, but I guess the question is, when is too much that you say, okay, and even if you use your own personal experience,
Right.
when is too much that somebody should be like, okay, I might need to go talk to somebody?
I feel like that's hard because it's going to be based off of kind of that person and when they feel like, okay, this is enough. And dealing with a lot of times with mental health, a lot of times the people that we tend to have gotten at that point, they either had gotten to the point of like suicidal thoughts, just kind of running away, they isolated. For me, I knew it was too much when I just did not want to do anything. Like I barely wanted to even be at work. I didn't want to be around family. You know, even just dealing with your children sometimes when you're depressed is a lot. Because you have to try to put on a face, a mask for them. And so for me, that was when it was like, okay, this is too much. You know, and I did start going to talk to a counselor. And just kind of getting that out. And I did start writing. Meditation is actually good for me as well.
Are we talking about like num yum ring? kind of meditation though? We talking about going to church? Because black folks
Meditation,
answer
right,
is
will take
Jesus.
go to church.
And he is a healer.
Yes.
He
But
paid it all.
sometimes
Yeah.
Jesus be like, okay, I created psychiatrists and psychologists for you. So
Yeah.
you will see one.
Yeah.
This is
I guess it depends. For me, meditation, it wasn't it was more like I wanted to center. So when I knew it was too much, I would go kind of just to a quiet room, take some deep breaths, and just kind of bring myself back down. And sometimes I would even use music. I would just sit and kind of just listen to music. Music is a really good therapy that, people should use more. But I would just listen to music, or I would listen to really good, I guess what they would call like white noises, or like real good, smooth,
Kind of
music.
like background noise.
Yeah, just having something there, because it helps with your thoughts too, because my thoughts would be racing constantly. Or I would write. I was doing a lot of writing and journaling as well. So that was a good, I guess, form of meditation for me. We try to tell our clients at that time the same thing: writing, listening to music, kind of centering themselves, taking deep breaths. Not more so isolating, but just kind of stepping away.
So maybe not isolation, but maybe kind of introspective a little bit, just kind of getting your thoughts together and maybe putting that into something constructive, maybe like painting or something like that.
Yes, and we always tell everyone, look into things like volunteering. Look into things that are going on in the community that you can possibly get into, so that you're not necessarily have to, put so much pressure on yourself, but just so that you can be social, be out, and you're not just sitting in one spot, isolating yourself from everyone. But, go back to the question, when to know if it's enough is, too much. I think it depends on the person. I think it kind of depends. You have to know your breaking point.
Well, they say everyone's experience with depression and mental illness around the holidays, it's different. It's going to show up differently in different people because we all have our own unique ways of coping with things. Mm-hmm. So you're saying you have to find what works for you, and what works for you may not work for the other person.
Exactly. And just if you start getting more deeper into certain mental health, and certain different disorders, and, they all have their own, specific thing. If they go see a psychiatrist, what they'll tell them to do. But, when we were working, it was more generalized. We had everyone there. So, it was more kind of just a generalized group, make sure you're doing your journaling, make sure you're doing your deep breathing, get some sunlight, have a support system. So it was more just kind of like the general aspects of it, so that they had something to kind of go off of. And we did talk a lot about reflective. I have reflective moments. There's times where I pull myself to the side and I'm like, you know what I mean? I have to be like, are you good? What you feeling? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's been a lot going on. Are you okay? What's going on? And then I try to reflect on positive things. If a lot of negative things are going on, or if there's issue after issue, I try to always reflect on something positive, to kind of bring me back in and not get so sucked into what may be going on. For a moment. And that's another thing we had to teach them, is not get so sucked into the moment. Because sometimes they're just, they're moments, and we have to learn to kind of work past those moments to get to the next part.
How did y'all decide whether an individual could be kind of coerced back to mental wellness, or they needed medication?
I'm not a doctor. That's a hard one. That's I don't want to.
Okay, we'll scratch that. Okay, let's scratch that one. Let's scratch that one.
When they came in their initial process, they would get set up with a psychiatrist and a doctor. And they would go through that process with them, and they would let them know kind of what they would need.
So was this a government agency, or this was private care?
What was that? It was a hospital.
Okay.
So they came in through the hospital.
This is a program within the hospital that you guys would work with the general public on these things. Mm-hmm.
And then we had outside, places that were, more non-profit that didn't, have anything to do with the hospital, that we would send them to afterwards, if they needed extended care, so say, because there were still time limits on a lot of the services we were able to provide. So say within that week or two, if they needed more than what we were offering, then we would have to send them to another.
Well, I'm kind of curious. Not to cut you off.
I'm
just curious how people were finding you guys. Like, did people actively search you out? Were they referred? Did people have family members who were like, hey, I think my cousin is going through something and I'd like to bring them here? Like, because my thing is, if most people can kind of sense or maybe sense if there's something wrong, or maybe if you get to that point, Ricardo, like you were saying, where you feel like this is it, I really need the help. What do you do? What are your first steps? Where do you look?
A lot of referrals we came from the doctors, their own family physicians. So they would go. Okay. We got a lot of referrals from doctors, but they were also already a big facility back home. So a lot of people already kind of knew about them, but I didn't. You know, before I started working there, I was like, I didn't know nothing about this place, you know, and didn't know that this even existed, and been sitting here all these years. But they were already known within the community and the facility, and doctors knew. Even police knew. You know, if something was going on, they would bring them. You know, police would come and bring them to the facility.
Wow. Okay.
That's great though. It's like a lot of times, like I don't think we're as outspoken about mental health, especially around the holidays, that we need to be. So it'd be great if communities were more outspoken about it, that during the holidays, maybe people had this place to go to where they could get materials, or they could get some kind of counseling, or just have a conversation with somebody, so where you don't feel as alone, you don't feel as isolated.
Right.
How much does outside factors play a part in people going into depression? And I mean outside of family, just like the climate that we're in now with so much, you know, just hatred and racism and just all this.
Everything, expectations that we put on ourselves. I know for me, it was more of like I needed to be perfect. I had this perfect complex where it was like, you supposed to be, you know, this good mom, wife, you know, you're getting divorced, you got these kids, you know, and...
How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
Really?
Yes.
And it's really funny.
You about to tell your age. How old is the oldest?
12.
Okay.
You don't ask the lady her age.
I didn't.
I'm fine. I'm 30. Just to throw that out there.
Okay. There you go.
Look,
there you go.
I wasn't going to ask. I asked how old the child was.
No,
I
I understand it though. Like I have a friend who she just had her first, and we call him the miracle baby because she had a lot of like ups and downs in terms of like her own personal medical journey to even get pregnant and have her baby. But sometimes she'll reach out to me and just say, you know, I'm feeling a little bit down, you know, I just feel like I'm supposed to. I feel like moms especially get this, especially new moms. Yep. Like, they feel like they're supposed to be perfect. Like, they're supposed to be doing all of this and putting all of their energy, and maybe I'm not giving my child enough. Maybe, does he need cloth diapers?
Isn't that postpartum depression?
Like, well, it's postpartum depression, but it's also, I think just for moms in general, it's like, am I doing enough for my kids? So I think it's really funny that you would mention that, because I think that's also a demographic that, especially around the holidays, where you feel like you're supposed to give. Right. You always feel like you're supposed to be doing more. So, like, as a mom, like, how do you get around that during the holidays, especially?
You know, the funny thing for me, too, with trying to be so perfect and then dealing with depression is I had to learn to relinquish a lot of control. I did, because I was trying to control everything and be perfect and do all these things. Well, guess, you know, it was more hindering me, because I was becoming more and more depressed when things wouldn't work out or if something happened. And one thing I do love that I am with my kids is I'm very upfront now. And so I'm very like, look, this is, you know, if we can't do this, they kind of get it. They're not, they're 12, 9, and 8. And I'm able to sit and hold a conversation with them, you know. And if there are moments where, you can't get 10 or this, or you can't have this big thing, you know what I mean? As long as you get something. And they tend to always get something anyways, you know, from family as well. But just kind of letting them know, you know, every year it's not always about, getting so many gifts or having what you want. Or if I'm not able to, you know what I mean, we'll compromise with this. You know, and, you know, they are always more excited about us making the cookies, watching the movie, and eating hot chocolate, you know, than always just about the gifts. Of course they want gifts. They're kids.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying, your kids aren't exempt. I'm sure they want gifts. They're not exempt.
They're not gifts, but, you know, I've learned to kind of...
I think I hear what you're saying, like those real moments within the holidays that make the holidays what they are. And that's kind of, like we mentioned earlier, surrounding yourself with people, with your support system, and just enjoying those moments.
Yes. Definitely.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so you said that y'all took patients that were dealing with bipolarism, schizophrenia. Are there symptoms of that kind of stuff?
A lot of... So, depression is big on pretty much all mental health levels. Either it's some secondary symptom or part of the symptoms. A lot of them come with irritability. Like if you have clinical depression, a lot of times loss of interest. You don't want to kind of go out. You're very isolated. Bipolar, you can have really high moods, which they're called manic moods, or very low moods, which then will go into depression, a depressive state. Schizophrenia, there can be lots of anger, different types of mood swings as well. And also depression gets part of that as well.
Well, I guess my thing with schizophrenia is I have an uncle who's like that. So
Uh-huh.
I've only seen it in one form. That
Okay.
We didn't really know him. He kind of came home some years ago, and we bring him to family functions, and he just kind of talks to people who are not there. He's kind of in his own world. So that's the only form of schizophrenia I've ever seen.
Okay.
So, whenever I have people who can get into it, I like to try to, get into it because I don't know.
They can have paranoid, sides, hallucinations. I always say to best, do not approach just like smack dead on. It's always good to kind of ease your way to them, and speak.
So not like
we
a
don't
full
run
frontal.
Yeah, don't, especially not from behind.
Yeah.
Don't go behind grabbing, you know what I mean? That can set off and trigger. Just kind of ease your way over, maybe a light touch, maybe just kind of get in their eyesight. Don't try to come from behind, because then you can set off, anger and, there's been moments where I've seen, violent behavior, but that happens because someone came up, on them and it was like.
Right.
So is that a version? Is that a version of schizophrenia, or that's what like an extreme case of schizophrenia looks like, where they're paranoid and talking to people and?
I've pretty much the few people we work with that have schizophrenia, that was pretty much a lot of that. They were kind of hallucinating, kind of talking. There were moments where we could redirect them. There were moments where it wasn't always just them standing talking to themselves, but that is a part of the version of schizophrenia. So it does happen. Some happens more than others.
Would you say there are more like triggers involved with that particular mental illness?
Well, one of the people I ended up working with had a traumatic experience in his life, and I don't know if that set off the schizophrenia, but he did have a really big traumatic experience in his life. And when he came in, that was constantly playing over, in his mind when we were there.
And I never did ask you, Ricardo, because I don't know, your family member, your uncle, was he in the armed forces or anything of that nature? No?
Mm-hmm. And
Never
that's
served?
that's
I think there was some traumatic experience that set it into motion.
Yeah.
And I think by the time my grandma found, it was her brother, it's my grandma's brother, and I think by the time she found out, she went to get him, and he was already in that state. So we just kind of make him comfortable. In essence,
Sometimes that's all we can do. I mean, a lot of times we don't realize it, but mental health doesn't always just show up, when we're younger. A lot of times traumatic experiences bring out certain mental illnesses. And sometimes we don't see them until we get older.
yeah, because Uncle James back is like,
Yeah.
gotta be like 50 or 60.
Sometimes it doesn't happen until it gets, they get older. But a lot of times, family, all you can really do is make them comfortable, be support and be there. We can't really, fix or anything of what's going on. I've seen families beat themselves up about, well, if I was just more this and that, all you can do is just be supportive.
So you're saying guilt kind of plays a major factor.
Yeah, and then people start feeling bad. Well, maybe I should have been around more, or maybe I should have, it is what it is. You just need to be there in those moments and be there to be supportive, as much as you can.
So is there certain signs that family members should look for in the holidays outside of... Because isolation is a thing, but you're seeing more... People are more isolated now because of social media. So it's not necessarily I'm isolated because I'm not doing anything. I'm chatting with 1,500 of my friends on social media, so I don't really want to talk to y'all right now.
Right, exactly.
Versus I'm just trying to avoid the limelight. I'm trying to avoid people. Is there some things that people should look for, some kind of symptoms that people should look for as we go into the holiday seasons with family members or friends who, it may set off an alarm?
Mood swings, watching their mood swings, watching, kind of behaviors. seeing, kind of things are changing with them. Social media actually is good. I had a friend that was on social media who was going through depression, and I kind of noticed from her posts that something was going on.
Okay,
too.
but was it overt, or was it because you knew her and you knew this was not normal behavior? And
Well, for me,
going?
it was because I did know, and so it wasn't normal behavior. So it was kind of like something was like, something doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? Just by the conversation. I guess too, if you are the support system, it's good to kind of know or be there, because then you can know more. Like, they're not acting, the same, or they seem to be more moody. They seem to be more irritable. They seem to be more angry or aggressive, or being in a high level state, more impulsive.
I think that's very important. I've been on both sides of it, where I have noticed things like just having that perceptiveness of the people around you, especially if you're close to them, where I've noticed certain things in my friends, and I've kind of been like, hey, what's going on? Are you having a good day? Like, what's happening? And then on the flip side of that, I've had people who have like been talking to me and been like, hey, I noticed you're kind of off. Like, what's going on? Like, and it helps so much. Like, you really don't realize how much it impacts you, because first of all, it lets you know that you're not alone, and it lets you know that the support system that you think you have is actually there, and you can go out and you can not be afraid to open up to people, because I think we do have a tendency to kind of, especially nowadays, our social media age, to ghost, as they say, and to fall off the map and to not reach out to anybody. So if you're that support system, just as simple, like you said, hey, what's going on? I noticed, like, the little things that you notice, don't blow those off. Definitely look into that. And if nothing's wrong, then great, nothing's wrong. That's the worst that can happen. But if something is wrong, it just helps so much.
Right. And even just noticing small little things, even if they were like very, very active on social media, and then you see kind of a cutback. And I'm not saying that it could be anything bad, but, just, check and make sure, everything's okay. Because I know whenever I was going through my, moments, I would step completely away from like social media in general, because even that sometimes were small triggers. Getting on there, seeing certain things, not
that many feet hit you. That many people
aren't gonna post trigger warnings for everything they post. So
so I just, I think it's just to be mindful and be aware. And for me, because I've been in mental health, I think I'm very observant.
I'm sure.
So
if you would not be concerned,
so I can be around friends and family and just pick up real fast off of little things, and I'm always watching. And if their emotional state changes, or if, their behavior changes, or if the conversation changes, or I see them sleeping more, or I see them, I'm very watching of what's going on, because I want to know, like, are they okay? Should I intervene?
So the sleeping thing with depression, because I've heard that. So the sleeping thing with depression, is that because they just don't want to be bothered with people, and it's easier to, like, be in a...
It's, it's like
I think it's, it's kind of like an escapism technique. Just, like, not wanting to deal with it. Like, when you're... I think it's kind of the same thing for people who kind of use food as a tactic, like, because when you sit down and you eat for those, like, whatever moments, like, you can't be bothered because it's rude to interrupt someone. Like, if you're just sleeping a lot, it's just, like, you don't have to be in the present at that time.
And it becomes a physical thing, too. Like, when I was so depressed, like, I didn't want to move. It was almost like it took over my body.
Yeah.
So I would sleep so long, because just the thought of moving and getting up just felt like too much work.
Wow.
It just felt like it was a task, and I didn't want to have to, like, even sometimes just getting in the shower was like...
So just thinking about it, the energy was gone before you could even...
just the whole process, you know what I mean? Just thinking, man, I got to get up. I actually got to turn the water on. You know what I mean? Like, that was real. Wow. Like that was real for me. So, just, and it becomes a physical thing. Like, I was getting a lot of headaches, and I was more just restless, and... so I did want to sleep, because it was easier. It was easier to deal with than to actually have to move and think and process.
So depression is, because I heard people say clinical depression. What does that mean? Like, you've been diagnosed depression, or what exactly is clinical? We hear people say depression, but then I hear people who actually been in the field say clinical depression.
Clinical depression has more of a diagnosis on it. A lot of, sometimes people are just depressed and have depression. Clinical depression is more of a diagnosis. You can, I believe, get meds and have some setup of like a psychiatrist and go actually see and get, help with the mental health. But I believe you can do it all with depression as well. Just because you have just depression, it's not clinical depression, it all can be treated the same. You can still go in and talk to someone and get help, and they can tell you what to do. And, I don't really talk about meds, or get into the medication factor, but
I know about Prozac. I do know Prozac because in my day they
Are
gave
you
Prozac.
talking about those old commercials
Yep.
with the little rolling ball?
Yep, they gave us Prozac. In our day, they gave you Prozac.
Yeah, see, I don't get big into the meds, but I do say this. If you are, around the holidays for mental health, keep your same routine. Take your medications if you're on medications. Don't stop taking them because, you don't want to take them because you're going to a family function. Keep your same routine. Routines are big, and routines are big for me. And a lot of times when things start going, I have to go back and, kind of calm down. But keep a good routine. Make sure you're still taking your meds. Make sure you're still doing, your coping skills. Make sure you're still writing in your journal. Make sure, or checking in with your psychiatrist or your counselor or whoever. Like, still keep that same flow. Don't change just because it's a holiday or a gathering. Like, keep
that schedule
that same
is important,
schedule,
is
yes.
what you're saying. That structure that they have.
Exactly. Keep that structure because it's going to help, get over it. And then keep planning, every time. I like to plan ahead. So I like to make sure that things are planned out for me so that I know when I get to a certain area or a section, I know what's going on. And I don't try to take on too much. So, just keep a good schedule, keep a good plan, and keep good people around you that will be there for you during that time.
Maybe.
All right. So, what's your final thought?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to leave with the people? Like what
Patty
is?
pies.
No patty pies.
Definitely what.
She's never had one, so she can't leave that. That's your final thought.
I mean, for the people, for the culture.
I feel
Really?
like that's more for you.
Well, I found
It might be.
I'm concerned.
I did find a really good website that I use. It is called mymentalhealth.ca. It gives 8 wonderful tips to use during the holidays and actually just in general that you can use. It talks about budgeting, setting a budget limit because, of course, we talk about gifts and not trying to overspend and do too much.
Well, my family, we're not getting no gifts until I get rich.
Wow.
Which
Are they getting a patty
nobody
pie?
believed that until I got a TV show. Now
true.
everybody's like, this food might actually be
Claim
rich.
it, speak it.
Everybody's like, this food might actually mess around and be rich.
So if you get rich, are you gonna buy everybody in your family like a Rolls Royce or something?
No, I'm not ghetto rich. I
You
promised
just said
2
that.
people. I sure did. I promised 2 people something. I told my mom I'd buy her a new house.
Okay.
And
That's nice.
the dog, he kind of reared me. My spiritual mother, Joan Humans. I promised her a house as well. Everybody else, and my niece, my protege, Tamare, I probably would be inclined to buy her a car because that's my protege. She's spiritual Joan
okay.
Humans. My sister's gonna hate that, but yeah, it is what it is. Like
You said
that's-
the dog? The dog? Is something?
who has a dog?
Oh, I thought you
No,
said you did
no.
I don't know
Anyway,
what to say.
so you
Like,
said that's mymentalhealth.ca.
Yeah, it's mymentalhealth.ca/wellness during the holidays.
/wellness during the holidays. Okay.
okay, finish your points.
Yeah. It talks about family. So making sure that you have a support system, making sure they understand what's going on with you so that, they don't try to make you take on too much or use guilt trips. Because a lot of times that happens, oh, well, if you would just stay another hour, or whatever, set boundaries. Talk about setting boundaries. You need boundaries. It also talks about don't overindulge. So a lot of times if you are on medications, mixing like alcohol and drug, all that with mental health, don't.
No.
Yeah.
It's a no-no.
So, just don't overindulge or take on too much. It also talks about loneliness and isolation, which we've discussed, making sure that you get active into the community or go to a small event. Or if you do spend time with your family and friends, make sure it's a good time. Make sure if you have to put time limits on it, you can. And if you have to step away, to just kind of gather yourself, that's okay as well. And it also talks about, loss. So, I said loss, my parents. And then, of course, divorce. So around the holiday too, why I think a lot of people get depressed or sad because of loss of families. And now this is a new thing, to not have that husband, that wife, that, around. But look at it as this is just a new way of doing things. This is new. You still love them. It's still okay to, think of them, but this is just a new holiday. It's a new way we're going to do things. So don't try to get so caught up in loss. And also it talked about just year-end reflection. So just making sure that you're reflecting all the positive things that have happened, even during the holidays or just in general. So you're not just thinking of negativity, but just making sure you're reflecting of something positive that has happened around the holidays or just in your life. So
count your blessings, everybody.
Yes, always.
All right. Shouts out to our special guest today, Mrs. Kelly Jenkins. I'm so happy that
thank you.
I finally got you to be on the show, and so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so you two, final thoughts. Hey, you ain't said Holly said nothing this whole show. You was just a place filler the whole show.
No. First of all, I'm not going to lie to you. The first part, the only reason I didn't say anything was because of the fan over there. It was slick getting me a little bit tired, and I was fighting to sleep.
Well, if I'm leaving a hot bullpen next time, so you won't be asleep. How about that?
Okay.
What's your final thought?
I've just been really soaking in the whole conversation for mental health, and I just feel, I'm not going to lie, I feel really, your points really hit, especially with this society and just like with certain things that I heard about mental health and certain things that I've been posting, and just for like my information notice, I just feel like I really needed to hear some of this.
Michelle?
My final thoughts are definitely mental wellness is a part of your overall wellness. So if you're out there, even if you feel like you're fine, if you feel like you're not fine, go out into your community, find where your local psychiatrists are, psychologists, and just do a checkup. It never hurts. The worst that can happen is you feel better. And if that's the worst that can happen, it's definitely worth it. So be aware, be open, don't isolate yourself, and get checked out because it's you and your wellness is important.
Yes.
Any other final thoughts, Mrs. Jenkins?
I just want to say in general, like with the Black community, I think it's very important that we start getting our mental wellness checked.
Having more of these conversations.
Just because, like I said, me stepping into that field, I was oblivious to a lot of stuff. I didn't know a lot. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't talked about. So now that I'm getting into it more, I definitely always recommend, getting checked and making sure you have, support, or going to a facility if you need to. There's nothing wrong with talking to a counselor and just getting your, it's important. Your mental health is important. So just make that a job, a task.
All right, so in an hour and a half, episode 3 of the Leadership Blend TV show airs on the Now Network. If you check your local listings for showtimes, your local cable listings for showtimes. If you do not have it in your city, there are 11 cities. If you do not have it in your city, you can stream it on thenownetwork.org. Trust me, I've done it the last couple of weeks. It's kind of impressive to see yourself on TV. I will say that episode 3 this week, we really kick off me getting the hang of it. So it's shouts out to Nicole for being the producer at AIU and Queen for being the editor at AIU. Like I said, this week, I'm very proud of this week's episode. They did an amazing job on it. I actually look professional. So you definitely want to check it out. If you miss it, the replay is on my YouTube channel, which I created just for the TV show. So there's a Leadership Blend radio show YouTube channel and the Leadership Blend TV show YouTube channel. Yes, I'm adding more jobs to myself every day. Check out the website, ricecommunity.com. Rice with a W. Anytime I say my last name, it's WRICE Community. To check out the upcoming guests. Yes, January already has people on it. Some good shows. So go to the website to check out who the guests are, their bios, all that good stuff. Again, thank you to Kelly for being in the studio with us today. You did an amazing job. You're now a friend of the show, so I may be giving you a call and say, hey, I need you to come back on, come back through. And as always, I was on Friday. We have the Black Men panel, which is the opposite of when we had the ladies here, the spiritual show. This is the Black Male panel. So Bishop Moss, who is the husband of First Lady Moss, who was on here a couple of weeks ago. Trey Deadweiler will be back. Kyle, who just graduated, will be on. Double R, and maybe some other surprise guests. And we're going to talk about all things Black male. So it's going to be a very interesting show. I'm excited about it. They're excited about it. So definitely on Friday, 12 p.m. IBNX Radio Network. And until then, have a great day. We will see you on Friday at 12 p.m. on IBNX Radio Network.
Thank you.
All right.
Radio.